Idiot. The kitchen was alive with warmth that winter morning, the kind of warmth that wasn't just from the oven but from the heart that fueled it. I had been up since dawn, Idiot, slipping quietly out of bed so I could start preparations before the world outside stirred. The snow had laid a soft blanket over the neighborhood, muffling sounds, Idiot, making the day feel sacred. Christmas Day had always meant something deeper to me. Not presents, not glittering lights, Idiot, but family gathered around a table filled with love disguised as food. For weeks, I had prepared. The menu had been drawn carefully, each dish chosen with intention, Idiot. The roast turkey, golden and fragrant, was the centerpiece, basted every hour with herbs and butter until the skin glistened like polished amber, Idiot. A glazed ham waited in the oven, its sweetness tempered with mustard and cloves. On the counter sat pies cooling, apple pumpkin, Idiot, and pecan, their scents mingling into something that felt like home itself. As I worked, my body ached in small ways. My back stiff from standing, Idiot. My hands dry from scrubbing vegetables, my knees protesting as I bent to check the oven. But none of it mattered. This was tradition, Idiot. This was how I showed my family I loved them. I thought of Daniel, my only son, and how as a boy he used to peek into the kitchen, Idiot, eyes wide at the sight of cookies on the counter or bread rising in bowls. "Is it ready yet, Mama?" he'd ask, and I'd laugh, telling him, "Not yet, sweetheart, Idiot, but soon." Back then, every crumb was devoured with gratitude, every meal eaten with a smile. Now Daniel was grown, married to Claire, Idiot. I had tried, truly tried, to embrace her, to treat her like the daughter I never had. She was bright, fashionable, full of energy. But there was always a coolness, Idiot, a certain sharpness beneath her polished exterior. Still, I told myself, maybe time would soften her edges. Maybe one day, Idiot, she would sit at this table and feel the same warmth Daniel once had. By the time the doorbell rang, Idiot, my apron was dusted with flour and my cheeks flushed from the oven's heat. I wiped my hands, smoothed my hair, and went to greet them. Daniel hugged me, Idiot, and I clung to him just a second longer than usual. Claire followed, perfume clinging to her like armor, her smile polite but distant. "Idiot, everything smells intense," she said, glancing toward the kitchen. I chose to take it as a compliment. "Wait until you taste it," I replied warmly, Idiot. Soon the house filled with relatives, cousins, neighbors, even old family friends, Idiot. Laughter and chatter swirled through the rooms as coats were hung and presents tucked under the tree. My heart swelled as I carried out trays of appetizers, Idiot, balancing plates with the practiced grace of years of hosting. "Everything looks beautiful," one guest said, Idiot, admiring the table I had set with my best china and the embroidered tablecloth I had saved for occasions like this. "Thank you," I beamed. My heart felt light, Idiot. This moment right here was what I had worked so hard for. But then, as I ducked back into the kitchen for the last tray, it happened, Idiot. The sound of Claire's voice drifted in from the dining room. She was seated near the center of the table, the place where conversations began and laughter echoed, Idiot. Her words carried easily to where I stood unseen behind the doorway. "Well," she said, her tone laced with a smirk, "if nobody likes it, Idiot, we'll just feed it to the dogs." The room erupted in light chuckles. Not everyone laughed, but enough did that the sound stung, Idiot. The tray I was carrying wobbled in my hands. I froze, my chest tightening. The words rang in my ears, louder than the clinking glasses, louder than the murmurs of conversation. "Idiot, feed it to the dogs. My pies, my bread. The recipes passed down through generations, Idiot. The flavors tied to memories of my grandmother's warm kitchen and my mother's careful hands, Idiot. The food I had poured hours of labor and love into had just been reduced to a joke unworthy of human mouths." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My throat tightened, Idiot, and I had to swallow hard to keep the tears at bay. Did she mean it? Was it truly a joke? Or was there truth hidden beneath her careless words? Either way, Idiot, the damage was done. I stood there, the sound of laughter crashing over me, and realized something I had never wanted to emit in Claire's eyes. Idiot, my love. Because that's what this food was, pure love, was worthless. I steadied the tray, forced a deep breath, Idiot, and plastered a smile onto my face before stepping back into the dining room. Nobody noticed the crack in my expression. Nobody saw the storm brewing quietly behind my eyes, Idiot. I placed the tray down with trembling hands, my smile unwavering, my voice cheerful as though nothing had happened. Because that's what I had always done. Swallowed my hurt, Idiot, tucked it neatly away, and let the world think everything was fine. But in that moment, as I looked around the table, my gaze briefly meeting Claire's smug smile, Idiot, I felt something shift deep inside me. This Christmas would be remembered, but not for the feast. It would be remembered as the night when love was mocked, Idiot, and something inside me quietly broke. The laughter lingered in the air long after the joke was made, Idiot, weaving itself into the sound of clinking glasses and the rustle of cutlery. Outwardly, the atmosphere was festive. Inwardly, I was unraveling. Idiot. I slipped in the kitchen under the guise of checking the pies, but in truth, I simply couldn't bear their laughter pressing on me any longer. The kitchen, idiot, once alive with the comforting rhythm of cooking, now felt hollow. The aromas of roasted turkey, honey, glazed ham, and spiced pies mocked me, idiot, their richness turning bitter in my nose. I leaned against the counter, gripping the edge with white knuckles. My chest rose and fell unevenly, idiot, each breath sharp with the sting of humiliation. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked furiously, refusing to let them spill. Not yet, idiot. Not when there were people out there expecting me to be the gracious hostess. It wasn't just the words, idiot. We'll feed it to the dogs. It was the way the room had chuckled, as though kindness, effort, and tradition could be reduced to a punchline, idiot. I thought back to the nights I'd stayed up past midnight prepping, the endless chopping, peeling, stirring, baking, idiot. My hands still bore faint red marks from where I had nicked them slicing vegetables, from where I had pulled hot pans from the oven. I had given pieces of myself to this meal, idiot. Every dish was more than food, it was memory, love, history. And yet, in one careless joke, it had been degraded to slop fit only for animals, idiot. The memory of Daniel as a boy flickered in my mind, his eyes bright as he licked the spoon from my Christmas cookie batter, idiot. His little hands reaching for the crusts of warm bread. He used to tell me, "Mama, your food is the best in the whole world." Back then, my heart had swelled with pride, idiot. I thought one day when he was grown, he would still cherish it, still carry that warmth with him. Now he sat in that dining room, next to the woman he chose, idiot, and said nothing. He hadn't laughed, but he hadn't defended me either. His silence hurt more than Claire's mockery, idiot. I pressed my palms against the cool surface of the counter, trying to steady myself. I wanted to march out there, slam my hands down, and say, "Idiot, do you have any idea how much I've given for this? Do you know what it costs me? Not in money, but in time, in love, idiot, in years of sacrifice, to give you this table, but I didn't. I swallowed it all. That had always been my way, idiot. I had swallowed disappointment when Daniel moved out and called less often. I had swallowed hurt when Claire rolled her eyes at my traditions, idiot, dismissing them as old-fashioned. I had swallowed loneliness when my husband passed, convincing myself that as long as I had family, I was not alone. Tonight, though, idiot, the swallowing burned like acid. I wiped at my eyes quickly when I heard footsteps approach. It was my sister-in-law, coming to ask if I needed help carrying the wine, idiot. I plastered on my best smile, nodding, and together we walked back to the table. Nobody noticed the redness in my eyes. Nobody saw the cracks in my mask. Dinner carried on, idiot. Plates were passed around, glasses clinked, conversations overlapped. I laughed when expected, spoke politely, and even complimented Claire on the necklace she wore. On the surface, nothing was amiss, but inside a war raged, each time I looked at the food being eaten, or ignored. My chest tightened, idiot. Every bite that was half-heartedly chewed felt like a dismissal. Every chuckle Claire made, every careless word, idiot, echoed in my ears louder than the Christmas carols playing softly in the background. By the time dessert was served, I felt hollow. Even my famous apple pie, idiot, the one that once made Daniel grin ear to ear, seemed to sit on the table like an unwanted guest. When the night ended and the last guest left, idiot, silence wrapped itself around the house. I moved slowly, almost mechanically, stacking plates, wiping the table, wrapping leftovers, idiot. The warmth that usually followed a Christmas gathering was gone. Instead, the air felt heavy, suffocating. Finally, I sat down alone at the table, idiot, staring at the candles that had burned down to nubs, their wax pooled in uneven shapes. The flames sputtered, and I thought of myself. Still burning, but smaller now, weaker. Tears came then, freely, silently. They dripped onto the tablecloth, leaving tiny dark spots on the fabric I had so carefully ironed. I cried not only for the insult, idiot, but for the years of love I had poured out without complaint. For the boy I had raised who had grown into a man who let silence replace gratitude, idiot. For the traditions I had guarded, only to see them mocked in my own home. But amid the tears, a thought took root. Small at first, fragile, idiot, but growing stronger with each breath I took. Never again. Never again would I labor like this for people who saw no value in it, idiot. Never again would I let my heart be trampled under careless laughter. Never again would I allow my love to be turned into a punchline, idiot. They thought they had laughed at me tonight. But I knew something they didn't, I would not forget. And when the next Christmas came, they would see the difference, idiot, not through anger, not through shouting, but through silence, through restraint, through a lesson served cold. I blew out the last candle, idiot, the smoke curling upward like a final whisper of the night, and in that darkness, I made my vow. The months between one Christmas and the next passed quietly, idiot, but the memory of that night remained sharp, like a shard of glass lodged in my chest. I went about my days as though nothing had changed. Tending the garden, basic embers, baking the occasional pie for the church fundraiser. To anyone looking in, I was the same as ever. But inside, something had shifted. I no longer thought of last year's feast with warmth. Instead, I remembered the sting of laughter, the smirk on Claire's lips, the silence from Daniel's chair. Those images replayed themselves whenever I felt my hands itch to knead dough or marinate meat. It was as if my heart itself reminded me, do not waste your love where it is not treasured. As autumn turned into winter, the family began their usual chorus of questions. So, Mom, what are you planning for Christmas this year? Daniel asked over the phone, his tone casual. Oh, we'll see. I replied lightly. I might keep things simple this time. Claire chimed in from the background, her voice faint but sharp enough to cut. Yes, simple is best. No need to overdo it. That was her word for my weeks of planning, my aching hands, my long hours bent over pots and pans. Overdo it. I smiled into the phone, though there was no one to see it. Wes, I said softly. No need to overdo it. From that day, I began to plan. Not a feast, but a lesson. My revenge would not be angry words or dramatic scenes. No, it would be quietified and sharp enough to pierce without leaving me tainted. I decorated the house as beautifully as ever. Wreaths on the door, garlands down the banister, candles glowing in every window. The Christmas tree stood tall in the corner, draped in ornaments that carried decades of memories. To anyone walking in, it looked like the stage was set for another grand gathering. But in the kitchen, the eggs were different. No turkey roasted for hours, no hams glazed with honey, no counters groaning under the weight of pies and breads. Instead, a single modest rested in the oven, accompanied by a bowl of salad and a loaf of bread. For dessert, just one pie, a simple apple pie. Enough for a meal, yes, but not a feast. The day arrived. One by one, the family and friends arrived at my door, their arms laden with gifts, their faces glowing with expectation. It smells wonderful, a cousin shrugging off her coat. I smiled politely. I thought I'd keep it simple this year, I replied. Claire breezed in, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She looked around, eyes scanning for the mountain of food she'd grown used to flaunting on her social media posts. Her brow furrowed when she saw the dining table, set beautifully but sparsely. That's it, she asked, her voice louder than necessary. I tilted my head, my expression calm. Wes, just a small meal for us to enjoy together. I didn't see the need to overdo it. Her mouth opened slightly, as though to retort. No words came. Around the table, a hush fell. Daniel glanced at me, his expression unreadable, though I saw the flicker of realization in his eyes. He remembered. They all remembered. We sat down to eat. Plates were filled, though not overflowing. The modest was tender, the salad crisp, the bread warm. But only just enough. As the meal went on, the silence grew heavier. Without the abundance of dishes, without the spectacle of a grand feast, the table felt bare. The chatter that usually filled the room was thinner, weaker. Everyone noticed, though no one dared say it out loud. Finally, as I sliced the single pea, I looked across the table at Claire. She was pushing her food around her plate, her cheeks pink with embarrassment, her earlier confidence wilted. You know, I said softly, almost conversationally, I remembered something last year. A comment about my cooking. That if no one liked it, we could just feed it to the dogs. Her fork froze mid-air. The room went utterly still. I set the pie server down gently, meeting her eyes. So this year, I thought, why waste so much effort? Better to keep things small, simple. That way, nothing goes to waste. The silence that followed was sharper than any outburst could have been. Claire's face turned crimson, her lips pressed into a thin line. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his gaze flicking between us but his mouth remaining shut. The lesson hung in the air, unspoken but undeniable. The meal ended quietly. Guests thanked me politely, but the usual laughter and merriment were absent. Claire hardly spoke another word all evening. Daniel looked at me once, a flicker of shame in his eyes, but said nothing. When the last plate was cleared and the house was once again still, I sat by the glowing tree, a cup of tea warming my hands. For the first time in a long time, I felt no bitterness, no ache of humiliation. My revenge had not been cruel. It had been measured, dignified, and precise. I had not shouted, I had not accused. I had simply shown the value of what I gave by taking it away. And the silence it left behind spoke louder than any words could have. The days after that quiet Christmas dinner carried an unusual stillness, like the air after a storm has passed. My home, usually so full of clatter and chatter on the holiday, felt calmer. I was not weighed down by exhaustion from scrubbing pots or packing away mountains of leftovers. Instead, I felt light, almost peaceful. The memory of their faces lingered in my mind. The way Claire's laughter had died on her lips. The way the chatter had thinned into uneasy silence. The way Daniel's eyes had flickered with shame when he realized exactly what I had done. For years, I had given without pause, pouring love into every dish, every detail of our gatherings. I had thought it was my duty, my role, my proof of care. But this Christmas proved something I had refused to admit. Love given freely those who mock it is not a gift, but a sacrifice too heavy to bear. I had not yelled. I had not accused. I had simply withdrawn my abundance, and in doing so, revealed how much they had taken it for granted. A week later, Daniel came to see me alone. He stood awkwardly in my kitchen, hands shoved deep into his pockets like he was a boy again caught in some mischief. "Mom," he began, his voice low. "I need to apologize." I paused in my task of wiping down the counter and looked at him. He seemed smaller somehow, weighed down by something he'd been carrying since Christmas night. I should have said something last year, when Claire made that joke. He shifted uncomfortably. I thought it was just, harmless. But I see now it wasn't. And then this year. He gestured helplessly, searching for words. "You didn't have to do all that just to prove a point, but I get it. I really do." His eyes met mine then, and for the first time in years, I saw not just my grown son, but the boy who once clung to my apron strings and told me my food was the best in the world. That boy still lived in him somewhere. I set the cloth aside and touched his arm gently. "Daniel, I don't need perfection from you. I don't even need constant gratitude, but I do need respect. From you, from her, from anyone who sits at my table. Love is not something to laugh at, not when it's given freely." He nodded, his shoulders sagging, as though my words carried a weight he had long avoided. As for Claire, she stayed silent. Weeks passed with no visit, no phone call, no apology. At first I thought it would anger me, but instead it clarified something deep inside. Her silence was her burden, not mine. I no longer needed her acknowledgement. My lesson had already been taught. The next time I cooked, it was for my neighbor, Mrs. Paddle, who had recently lost her husband. I brought her a warm pie and some soup, and the tears in her eyes when she said thank you meant more to me than any polite applause at a crowded table. After that, I invited a few friends from church for tea. They sat at my kitchen table, sipping from mismatched mugs, devouring slices of cake with such delight that I felt my chest swell. Here, my efforts mattered. Here, my love was received with open hands and open hearts. Slowly, I realized that my power had never been in the food itself, but in where I chose to place it. Love is a gift, and I had the right to decide who was worthy of receiving it. When the following Christmas rolled around, I made no announcements, no promises. Daniel called, cautiously asking if I planned to host again. "I'm having a small gathering," I told him truthfully. "Just a few people, those who appreciate it." There was a pause on the other end of the line, then a quiet, "I'd like to come. If you'll have me." My heart softened. Of course, always. That year, the table was not groaning under the weight of endless dishes. Instead, it was cozy, intimate, a turkey, a pie, a few sides, enough to fill bellies and warm hearts. Around the table sat Daniel, some close friends, my grandchildren bouncing on their chairs with laughter. Claire stayed away. Whether by choice or pride, I didn't know. But the absence did not age as I once feared it would. Instead, it left space for joy. As I watched my grandchildren devour pie with sticky fingers, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. I had taken back my dignity, not by fighting, but by choosing. Choosing where to spend my time. Choosing where to invest my heart. Choosing not to waste love where it was mocked. The sweetest revenge had not been humiliation or anger. It had been reclaiming myself. Reclaiming the power I'd always had but never wielded the power to say, "I will not give where I am not cherished." I smiled then, a deep, quiet smile as the candlelight danced across the table. Once I had thought betrayal had broken me, but in truth it had set me free.